Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the 11th edition of the FreeFuse Sessions interviews. I'm here today with Michael Stinnett, also known as the Unstuck Coach, and someone who really loves to help people reach their highest potential. Right now, I've seen him do some fantastic work with folks who are transitioning teachers and really spend a lot of time talking about ways that they can reach their fullest potential. But of course, I feel like that's not doing him justice. So, Michael, if you want to go ahead and provide, more information about yourself and, kind of how you got started in, building yourself up as the Unstuck Coach with your unique background, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. First, Mike, thanks so much for having me on, inviting me to do this, and for what you're doing in the educational space and different ways that you're using your gifts and your skills to just help people comprehend things and understand better. That's exciting for me. So I'm happy to have this connection. And so as an unstuck coach, what does that mean? I was in education for over a decade, and I worked with students who often felt like they didn't have a voice, and they were kind of in this muddy space and didn't know how to move forward. And so I just kind of started trying to figure out what that looks like. I was in ministry for 20 plus years in a church role and trying to help people get out of these spaces where they feel kind of trapped. They feel like they can't go forward. And usually that was because they didn't know the next step because it was too cloudy. So I just thought, well, I really like helping people do that, like uncover what the next step is. And you said this, like trying to help people find their highest potential. And for me, what that looks like generally is helping people see what a life of hope looks like and a life that is flourishing looks like. And so many of us don't even have the capacity for imagining what a hope-filled life, what a flourishing life looks like. We imagine it's not reachable for us. And so I am so excited to have the opportunity to help people actually discover that they can live a hope-filled, flourishing life. They just have to get unstuck.
And I must say, that's one of the best parts of the work that you put out that I really appreciate, because I feel like there's a lot of people who sell themselves short. They talk themselves into worse outcomes. And sometimes I feel like it's honestly not even a product sometimes of them not even be able to think it. It's almost that they want a really amazing life, but they don't see the steps. They don't know how to get there. So they sell themselves short on, I'm willing to take 30% of my most amazing life rather than really get to that 100% because I have no idea. So when you're working with folks, how have you been able to help folks overcome that real maybe feeling of dread, I would say sometimes, or that feeling of hopelessness that comes from having ambition, but not knowing how to make the most of it and achieve those goals?
Yeah, great question. How do they overcome the feeling of dread? That is certainly something that I get to do a lot in the transitioning educator space, whether it's with teachers or principals, administrators, whoever it is, because they do feel kind of trapped in this space. And then externally, they feel like people are judging them if they leave education. Internally, they're feeling a lot of guilt on leaving the kids and that. But what I find often is they're so exhausted and they have to do something else. But the challenge for them, Mike, is that they don't see how their skills in the classroom, their skills in the school translate to roles outside of that, because all they've ever done is work with kids. And they're scared about walking away from a security, walking away from a safe job, and safe in the mindset of they have it. It's not going away. And so that terrifies them. They're afraid of what they're going to feel like. Are they going to miss it? They're afraid of, am I going to have retirement? What are my options going to be? How long is it going to take? Right now, we're seeing the averages are like 4 to 6 months. Well, that's a long time for people to try to transition. And so for me, it's making the goals smaller. What I mean by that is I take whatever the dream is for you, whatever that flourishing life looks like for you, and we backwards design your process to get there one small step at a time. Because people often are so like, if I'm working to climb a mountain and I get up to the mountain and I look at the mountain, it's terrifying. But if I just look at the next step, that's not nearly as scary. And so I want to help people identify their skills and passions, and where do those align with a career. And if we can identify your skills and passions, that's about you. And we can talk about you, get you real clear on you, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and then who will pay you to do that. And once we find those things, we just make the path forward. We build the resume, we get your interview strategy right, we do the social media stuff. And it's those small steps. Once we break it down into small steps, that's when I find that people start to gain confidence and they lose some of that sense of dread.
And now I can kind of almost see why, you've kind of vibed with the whole aspect of what we've created at FreeFuse, right? Where we've kind of broken things down into, sort of these shorter bite-sized segments. I can see now how you're actually helping people reach more achievable outcomes because you've actually broken them down into shorter bite-sized accomplishable elements. I see that.
Yeah.
That makes, and you know what? It's funny that you mentioned that because a little while ago, I remember I was talking with somebody about how they were helping people get over emotional distress. And they talked about how it's not about trying to go from I feel really sad to I feel really happy and just kind of have this weird sort of manic depressive kind of thing. It was really about helping them ladder up to finding better, happier outcomes for themselves on a regular basis. So I really appreciate, sort of how you've been able to weave that into, getting somebody who maybe doesn't feel like they can accomplish something and moving them so much closer to a place where they see that they're so much more capable, right? And the one thing I really appreciate about that approach is a lot of people don't realize that they have skills that translate, right? So when you're helping folks, maybe, whether it's a transitioning teacher or working with somebody else, how do you feel like someone, if they're maybe trying to work on this, kind of first step on their own or something, or just trying to recognize if they do have applicable skills, what advice would you give somebody to help them maybe see if their skills translate into other places, or if they need to add more skills to the toolbox?
Yeah. Okay. One, that's a great question too. So how do my skills translate to other places? So do I have enough skills to translate now, or do I need to add some new skills? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
great. One, there's with so many people on LinkedIn who are willing to have conversations, I think one great idea is to see if you can just engage some people who are doing the thing that you want to do. And then you can learn what skills do they use. And then another beautiful feature on LinkedIn is you can actually find people who used to do what you do. So for example, educators, you can find people who used to be teachers, but now they are project coordinators. And you want to know, how do their skills translate to project coordinator? And then you hear, okay, that's good. I like that. I can do that. And it's so neat. Another thing, and with Chat GPT is all the rage, right? I love Chat GPT. So if you throw in a list of skills that you have and a list of passions that you have into Chat GPT and say, hey, what jobs would I be good for? It'll spit out a list of jobs that you might be able to do and then pick a couple and research them. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be hard. And I think that, Mike, is the deal, is that we've got to make it simple. When we make the process simple, people can do it. But everyone imagines that it's complex. And as long as we keep it complex, we don't do it. Because if there's friction, I find the easy path. I'm like water. I want the least resistance, right? And so trying to help people really nail down first, what are your skills? And not just the skills you think you have. I'm a huge data, but I'm a data junkie. What are the skills that you can prove? Like, you can't tell me that you're good at communication if you can't prove it. Like, you can't tell me that you're good at organization if you don't have evidence. So you've got to be able to prove it. And then we start looking at jobs. And you asked about upskilling. What are the things I need to add to my toolbox? This is so helpful. First, certifications, credentials, those are all great, but they are not as important as what you have done, what you have accomplished, what outcomes can you reach. These certifications, however, will help you be more high priority candidate than someone who has similar experiences as you. So I encourage people, once you nail down the path that you want to take, like the role that you want to move into. For example, I was working with a principal a couple of weeks ago who's looking to transition into project management. And we broke down the different projects that this principal has been involved in, and he had some great ones. And we found all the different pieces in those projects, the skills of establishing timelines, managing the life cycle, overseeing the budget, assigning roles, all of those things. And man, it was beautiful. And this was awesome. Like, it wasn't a week before he started getting interviews. But what he didn't have was the certification. So I talked to him about what it looks like to get a project management certification and how that was going to be the icing on the cake, because his resume is beautiful. But in order to get that money that he wants, it might be helpful to have a credential. So I think it's important to know, if it's listed on the job description, then it's probably helpful. That does not mean, though, that you have to have it right away. You can be working toward it. Right. So if it's asking for Salesforce, then I can just enroll in a Salesforce course, and then I can drop that on my resume and put expected here, or this is the date, or something like that. Right. And so I'm showing that I'm willing to invest in my career. I'm trying to meet the requirements. And that's important, I think, for educators who have every year had to learn new software, new technologies, or new skills. Like, you're doing it already. So find ways to continue doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And first of all, it's funny you mentioned kind of like utilizing ChatGPT. I almost think that there's apparently an opportunity that people have where even using that, you can become a prompt engineer, right? Like, actually creating like the best prompts so that people can find the best stuff. And it's funny because, like, I've spent most of my life hoping that Google would be like that. Because I would put in entire, like, hey, I just need all of these things. And instead, I would, ask it a question or put in the relevant search terms, and, it would give you like a list of a bunch of sites, and inevitably I would have to find that. So, being able to utilize something where you can ask it, hey, what are my translatable skills from this to this, and have it, give you all of these options is a really awesome way. And at the same time, you could actually grow skills towards actually becoming a prompt engineer. But it's interesting you talked about the whole certification thing, because I think that's a sticking point, right? A lot of people say, oh, I don't have a certification, I can't apply for this job, or, oh, I could never be in that field. I don't have as much experience about, X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that's equally as much, yes, you need the skills, but I always feel like that's one of the reasons why people can give themselves as a non-starter, like a reason why they don't necessarily need to try, because there are no avenues. But it's really that they kind of give themselves that negative self-talk, or they find the reasons to staying the same. So when you work with folks, in the beginning, and I imagine you probably have dealt with this quite a bit yourself, how can someone really get over that sort of, self-talk, or, kind of talking themselves down from actually making a change, that sort of inertia that comes with doing something different that they might not be used to?
Yeah, what a fantastic question. You're like reading through like what I do. And so it's really neat, because I actually have a client right now, and we've been meeting for the last few weeks on working through the challenging assumptions that this client has on, if I fail to learn something quickly enough, I'll be fired, and I'm not going to learn it fast enough. And so she's already limiting her opportunities because she's thinking that she's not going to be able to do this. Side note, her history proves that she learns quickly. Her history proves that she's a quick problem solver. She's a creative problem solver, and she's actually come up with some great ideas that have saved time and money for organizations that she's been a part of. But she doesn't see that. All she sees is the fear that I'm not going to be enough. And so we do have to help people lean into their work history, their work experience, the skills that they've proven, and what they've accomplished, to give them confidence that they can do it again. And it is real for people to face those challenges. And then you mentioned this. One of the struggles right now is, like, you have to have experience to get the job, but then how do you get experience if you can't get the job? And there is sometimes, some people call it the catch-22. And I think that it's less prevalent than we think it is. And what you said resonates so strongly with me. You said that sometimes we want to give, it's almost like we want to give ourselves a reason not to do the work. I think you said something like that. And I was talking to my son last night. I have a 17-year-old boy, and he was talking about some of the challenges that he's facing. And I said, well, his name's Malachi. I said, one of the things that people often do is they avoid doing the work. That way they're not to blame if they don't get the outcome. They can always say, well, if I would have tried harder, if I would have studied, I would have scored higher. If I would have practiced, I would have played more. But since you didn't do those things, you can always kind of write it off as, well, it's because I didn't do that thing. And I'm like, and we're seeing that now in the job market. It's like, well, I'm not going to be able to get hired, so I'm not going to take the course. I'm not going to get hired, so I'm not going to apply. I know that if you don't apply, you won't get hired. Like, that seems to be pretty true. And I know that if you don't take the course, then the certification won't help you because you're not going to get it. So it's like, don't make it so easy for you to write yourself off. Like, believe in yourself, invest in yourself, and upskill. I think that's a great question.
Well, you know what's funny is I actually think, well, I don't want to call it a almost delusional take, right? But I think there's some people who they use that on the flip side to make themselves feel like, well, I always have time. I'm always going to like, there's this untapped potential I always have. And they tell themselves that, and yeah, I mean, like, I'll even give my own life experience, right? Like I always told myself when I was younger, like, oh, well, I didn't really need to like spend as much time learning. And I mean, some of that was just like kind of hubris from like, I could just go and easily process information, do well on tests. So I was always like, well, I have these aims and goals that I have, in my life to build something truly meaningful, to, have it scale to, be as large as any large company that exists out there. And it always was something that stuck with me. But, over time, I got older and kept on trying to push it back. Right. And like kept telling myself, well, like I'm just not doing it now. So, but I'll always have an opportunity. Right.
Right.
And I think that in my own personal story, one thing that happened was, I had some, sort of personal issues that arose, not from any of that, but, just things that kind of sort of kick you in the butt, right? And they really make you realize I really don't have time to be wasting on just, sort of thinking that I'm always going to have this potential and always have, this opportunity and time. Like it's time to do things now. And, sometimes that's just how things shape out where it pushes you in that direction. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that whether you're telling yourself that you can do something and because of that, you decide you don't do it because you feel like you have the potential, or whether you feel like you can't do it at all and you just talk yourself out of doing it, like you said, to give yourself reasons to maybe not feel like you were perfectly responsible for that failure, so to speak, then, those are kind of just they're really all the same problem. They're dressed as kind of like different people, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and so one thing I really appreciated kind of going through some of the materials, throughout the last few days prepping for this was I really appreciate how you talk about your own story about getting over imposter syndrome. And I think that one of the things that I feel like sometimes drives imposter syndrome is that even when you are moving in another direction of career success, like let's say you've moved into that place and you're now going in that direction. I think that sometimes we can look at other people and compare successful people to ourselves and then
Yeah.
find that, well, I'm not anywhere near like that. So even when you do make the momentum, you throw yourself 3, 4, 5 steps back and you feel like you're at square one. So when you're working with people, do you kind of cover that imposter syndrome and how maybe we can not really compete against other people or, kind of look at ourselves in maybe a more positive light?
Yes, I do. And my very first client transitioning teacher, um, we noticed right away there was massive imposter syndrome. I saw the resume, I saw the skills, I saw the curriculums that she had developed, the programs that she had developed, the way her students were achieving, the mentoring that she had done in the schools, lead teaching, and all these different things. Just a second. All these things that person was responsible for. And I'm like, oh no, hold on. you're doubting yourself, and it's because you don't believe that you can do these things. And that's because you're not seeing all the things you have done, because that's just what I did. That was my job. And they don't realize that, yeah, it's your job, but those are things that normal people can't do. Like it's this, and here's the beautiful part. And my friend and business partner, Scott Henson, always says this: the skills that you have now, the skills that have made you successful now, you take those skills with you. They're going with you. So if you were a skilled communicator, you're going to be one still. If you were an organized person, coordinator, you're going to be one still. It's in that, leaning into helping people repurpose themselves. Whenever we have our cohort for transitioning teachers or transitioning career people in May, we're actually doing career transitions for anyone. Our very first session is about identifying your clarity statement, which is your purpose statement, and it connects to your passions and your principles as a person. Because I think for so many people, imposter syndrome is so big because we've lost our sense of identity, because I attached my identity to my performance. I attached my identity to my achievements instead of my personhood. When I find my value through the things that I accomplish rather than through who I am, I'm going to struggle with imposter syndrome whenever I transition to a new career, because I haven't accomplished anything yet. And then so it's like, I don't have anything that proves my value. And so that's where, for me, we go back to the core to overcome those imposter syndrome things. And then let's just be honest, if it's kind of deeper rooted, especially like if someone has like clinical kind of imposter syndrome, then I'm just recommending them to therapy. I encourage them to get, mental health is so important. And I am not a mental health counselor. I'm not a therapist. I am not licensed for that. And so I encourage them to go find someone that can help them through those things.
And that's, I think sometimes what ends up happening is people maybe incorrectly diagnose something that, might be a clinical thing sometimes, to trying to be as helpful as possible to somebody, not realizing that they might be, maybe doing some more damage than good. So I'm glad that you added that level of clarity as well. And, one of the things that I also enjoyed reading about the other day in terms of, your programs is helping people find that clarity of purpose, right? Like, and I think that a lot of folks sometimes, and what I've seen is people shortchange this part of their life. But I feel like some of the people that I've talked to, maybe they're kind of in like, mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s. I'm finding that a lot of folks that I talk to are missing the purpose kind of statement. They're finding the sort of, lost in doing whatever their work is, and they're not sure where they want to go with their life. And so they spend a lot of time wandering, and wandering can happen in so many different facets, whether you're wandering from job to job, whether you're wandering from continent to continent, remote work, whether you're, wandering from relationship to relationship. And there's so much of that, because in reality, it's not that you're unhappy because of, moving from thing to thing, or there's this like underlying unhappiness. Is that you're not sure about what you really should be doing with your life that will provide meaning. So, for folks who maybe just want to take the first steps in finding that clarity, and of course, they should go to that, session with you, and you be able to, learn all the good parts of what you do. Are there ways to maybe get started in the right direction towards finding that clarity of purpose? Are there things that I can draw from in my own life that I can maybe just attempt to get started?
Yeah, I think so. And you're so right. We lead to wandering and things like that, and that's a normal part of life. So for us, our first step is, let's talk about things that you've done in your life that you're proud of. Like, what are the things that excite you to talk about? And if we can make those career related, that's better. And so I would ask you, Mike, I'd be like, so what are one or two career accomplishments that you've had maybe in the last 5 years that you're really proud of? And then you would give me an example. So here, tell you what is something that you're really proud of?
I'm really proud of building my company. That's always going to be very, very proud of that. Other part that I'm really proud of is being able to get a doctorate degree, from an engineering degree from Texas A&M. was very proud of both of those accomplishments. And, I think it really shows, I think there's a certain level of fortitude, and kind of resolve, at the same time resourcefulness, that come from that. And I think that those two items make up a large brunt of who like to be, right? And
Yeah.
so that's why I always list those as accomplishments, because I feel like there's some of my best qualities exemplified in two accomplishments.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so I would take you to the next step and I'd be like, okay, so what is it about building your business that you are proud of? Like, was it just building a business, or is there something attached to your business that excites you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there was an underlying need from where I came from as a teaching assistant, and noticing that there was more efficient ways to do things, right? And there was a more efficient way to deliver information, and there was a way to actually de-stress both sides. It
Mm,
wasn't like, hey, you want to load up on one side and help only the students, or you want to load up on the other side and only help the teachers. There were benefits to both sides. More relevant communications for the students, less work on the teacher's side. And so everybody
yeah,
could hop into a solution that benefited everyone. And of course, if you market something as being able to, do something with just one click, well, a lot of people are just interested by the premise of even just trying it out. So I think there was that element of just delivering joy to people, delivering a sense that this is something valuable and exciting for them to use, and valuable to, in the sense of actually having an outcome they wanted to have.
mhm,
And the other item is really more the kind of the excitement of just building something that actually has meaning beyond myself. Because
yeah,
you could easily be a solopreneur and there's fulfillment to that, but being able to build an organization of like-minded people who are all moving in the exact same direction, and being able to shepherd that development and growth and really have an impact on the lives of myself and others, is one of the most exciting parts of what I do. So.
yeah. That's awesome. So you got all these things about making education more efficient for both the sender and the receiver, the teacher and the student. You've got building a business that provides opportunities for more people as opposed to just yourself. And so those are all really, really neat things. And I would say then, from all of that, what are maybe two passions that you could identify in that accomplishment?
I think and I always joke about this, so hopefully this doesn't come off as weird, but I have like a maniacal thing about self-improvement, like, kind of always looking to, people always talk about this concept, and I share this with other people, especially people who are busy, about getting better by 1% every day. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it's compounding. It's not that you got better by 1% and you get better 365%. It's actually getting yourself 1% better that day, which, if you were 1% better from yesterday, is actually like a large compounding effect. And of course, I won't go over the math of that right now because it just gets crazy. But being someone who loves to improve myself and improve the things that I do, and figuring out how to be more efficient, it's like engineering mindset, as well as like obviously, being able to make your product and services or organization better. So everything is kind of like a manifestation of that, and it's why I really like software, because at the end of the day, I can go and iterate on something and I can do it tomorrow. If I have to go and iterate on like a machine or a robot, it's gonna take me a little bit of time else to go ahead and do that. So
Sure.
so that's one thing. I'd say the other part is really also the ability to have a really good sense of how to kind of deal with a bunch of different personalities as well. Like, there's people who sometimes you need to um, give a little bit more slack to, because they don't need as much direction. All they need is just, I need a few communications here, and I can go on my way. There's some people who really do kind of like to be sort of coached up, a little bit harder. And I take it from my own time playing sports, and also, from what I've seen from some of the most successful like sports coaches, and people who have even taught like executive leadership coaches, right? Knowing what brand of how to deal with each person that I can, because that's kind of like a skill I feel like that has helped me sort of work through individual people. So that's really been that to me is one of my greatest assets, because that's what's allowed me to be resourceful, is knowing how to work with different types of people, and know exactly where it is that they need me and how to approach them in the most effective way. So those are, in my opinion, those are two of the places that I feel, kind of are exemplary towards what accomplishments those are, and kind of how
Yeah.
those two things link.
Man, that's fantastic. And so in all of those things, right, I'm listening for the pieces that we can latch on to, and then we can dig down a little bit further, right? Because we're looking for identity, we're looking for purpose. And I heard the first thing that you talked about was self-improvement. Like, you're a nonstop, always improving. What can I do better? What can I do better? But that's not just about you. That's probably about what you see around you too. And it's about what you create. Okay, well, how can it be better the next time? And so you're probably creating feedback opportunities. You're probably doing all these things. And I love the 1% better. From Atomic Habits, James Clear, when he talks about that, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in on that. Like, don't miss the gym 2 days in a row if you miss it once, right? So I love the focus on always improving. I caught that from you. And then I caught this thing, and you didn't say it this way. So I'm wondering, is it that you have a passion for empowering people to do the things that they do best in the way that they best do them?
I think that I strive to empower people to do the best that they possibly can be, do the best job in their own possible unique way. At least I try to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I heard there, and what you were talking about with giving your team. Some of them need more coaching, some of them need less coaching. So you're empowering them. So, which is probably like, you're equipping people with the tools that they need, the skills that they need, and then you're empowering them to do those, to accomplish the tasks that they're given. And those are beautiful things. So it seems like always improving, and then creating a culture of empowerment. If you have a culture of always improving and a culture of empowerment, and those are things that you're passionate about, then my next question is, so what are 2 or 3 skills that you have that make that possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that in that realm, I'd probably say that the 2 skills that I have that are really great for that, I feel like, I have a great level of emotional intelligence, and then I also have an ability to, sort of understand how to put folks in the right places to succeed, right? And sometimes it is trial and error, but like, so looking at what skill, similar to what you were saying, right? I try to find what skills that people have and try to adapt them into a role that allows them to succeed best. So in kind of like a similar style of how you're asking me these questions, I actually like to ask somebody, first of all, what do you like to work on the most? What are you really good at? And how can we find, sort of that Venn diagram of all those things to help you get to a role that's meaningful with us?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so good. Mike, Scott and I, we actually created this career fit Venn diagram, where one of the circles is your passions and the things that you care deeply about. So making improvements, empowering people. Another one would be your skills. And so it's like identifying people's strengths and putting them in those strength places, using emotional intelligence to create a safe, inclusive culture, maybe, and other things, right? And so clearly for you, it's engineering, also like creating things. And then the other would be achievements. And so we put those circles together, and where they overlap, that's your sweet spot. That's where your career goes, because my passions, my skills, and my achievements all come together. Because if I just have my passions and my achievements, but my skills weren't used, well, it's probably because I was part of a team that accomplished something. And if I'm tasked with doing that, I'm going to fall flat. And if it's just my skills and achievements, but I'm not passionate about it, then I'm going to burn out. And so it's like, find that space where all of those things come together. And that is beautiful. And that's where, if I can help educators, if I can help project managers, if I can help accountants, if I can help anyone lean into the passions and skills that they have, look at the achievements that they've been able to get, the results they've been able to get, and we can find the next step for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And walking through it, obviously, and having those questions is such a nice demonstration of like what it would be like, sort of working with you. And I'm glad that, some, people, I feel like sometimes, like you said, they might feel, a little bit guilty about leaving the kids, or they might feel guilty about X, Y, and Z about leaving this profession. Maybe it's the sunk cost, right? Like, oh, hey, I spent all my life learning to be an
Yeah.
educator, and now I'm going to walk away from it. And so I'm glad that, we can actually maybe break this, entire conversation up into shorter segments that I feel like are actionable for some of these folks to really gain a lot of benefit from. So I know that you're, doing that webinar, if I recall correctly, it's in a few weeks, you said, or that session that you have coming up.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're finishing one for April. And then in May, we're going to launch, and this is going to be our first time doing it this way. We're actually launching a 21-day career cohort where we're going to take people through. In the first week, we're going to do 3 sessions. We're going to go through career clarity. We're going to go through building your resume and then how to target your resume. And then we're going to apply for jobs over the next 14 days. And we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to help you track your job applications, because our goal is essentially 21 jobs in 21 days. And how can you apply for targeted, focused jobs that match your skill set and your passions so that you're more likely to get to the next step? We see too many people just throwing resumes all over the place, throwing applications all over the place, and there's no focus, right? And that creates a lot of insecurity because you throw 100 resumes out and you didn't get any callbacks. Well, you weren't going to get callbacks because you weren't a fit for any of those. So we're going to help you know if you're a fit, target your resume, make the application so that you can land the job.
Yeah, and that's speaking of obviously very simple and like easy to wrap your head around process. 21 applications in 21 days. Like that's a pretty great, kind of easy thing to remember. And so, of course, for those of you who'd like to know more about that, obviously, in the post we'll have a link to actually being able to access that information. And of course, you can also connect with Michael on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there as well, as am I. So, feel free to go ahead and connect with him there. But I know we're, kind of coming up to time here. I just wanted to see, other than the webinar, or excuse me, the 21 applications in 21 days, sort of cohort, is there anything else that you have right now that you feel like would deliver value for some of the folks who wanted to take a listen and, see a little bit more about what you're doing?
Yeah, there's actually something that's coming up, and it's free, and you can sign up at any point in time. Is we have a 5-day email course for optimizing your LinkedIn profile for career seekers. And so it's one step each day for optimizing your LinkedIn. So we'll have I can give you the link to that. There's a landing page where you just put your first name and your email, and then boom, you get the email course, and it starts right away where you are. And that email course will actually have a lot of information about other things that we offer, but it's completely free. And we think it's going to be a really, really big help for people.
Yeah, and definitely. And I think a lot of folks really, kind of struggle sometimes with social media profiles, whether, it's in, something like that's a little bit more on the entertainment side, like your Instagrams and, Twitters and stuff like that. But I found it's funny that people actually really struggle with the LinkedIn side, just because it is like a lot of professional stuff and you get to put the accomplishments and things like that. But people still struggle with that. So I'm really glad you have that program, up and running, or you'll have that up and running soon. So I'll of course put a link to that as well. But with that, I just want to say thank you so much for the time. Just so much good stuff here, and so much actionable things for folks who are looking to move to another role, another career, maybe have a second lease on life for them. So glad that they could get some of these insights and then perhaps connect with you and learn more about how they can get unstuck with whatever avenue of life that they're on right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. Thanks so much. And I look forward to connecting with anyone, and just reminding people to take small steps. Everything happens in small steps.
Great, great. Well, for those of you listening at home, thank you so much for joining us once again. We appreciate your time, and we will see you on the next edition of the FreeFuse Sessions interviews. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your week.